My name is Rich Harrington, and welcome to Understanding Adobe Photoshop. Today, we're going to tackle a long-awaited and much welcome feature in Photoshop CS5, and that is the improved Merge to HDR command. Now, HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, and what's happening here is you combine multiple pictures together to show a broader range of exposures. You see, the human eye is much more sensitive than a digital SLR camera, so you have to take multiple pictures and combine them to really simulate what the eye can see. Now, the process is fairly straightforward, but I want to point out a couple of basic tips. First off, if at all possible, use a tripod. Because you need to take multiple pictures, you're going to want those pictures to be very stable and line up with each other. If you're shooting handheld, it's very difficult to get those multiple exposures without subtle variation. If you don't have a tripod, I recommend finding a flat surface and stabilizing the camera that way. Next, one of the things to keep in mind is that you're going to need multiple exposures, typically somewhere between 3 and 7. Now, if you're using a modern professional digital SLR camera or even a semi-professional one, you might find a feature called bracketing, which will automatically rack through the different exposures, shooting under and overexposed images for you with just a single push. This puts the camera into burst mode and it'll just rack through the different exposures, which is a great way to create a high dynamic range image. If not, you're going to need to make tweaks as you shoot and do this manually. So let's see how they all come together to create an HDR image. Inside of Photoshop, you could choose File, Automate, Merge to Hdr Pro. Now, if you're not using Photoshop CS5, you'll find Merge to HDR, but it's not nearly as useful as this new command. When you do that, a dialog box comes up and you need to choose which files you want. I'm going to click Browse and navigate to a folder filled with some exposures. Here, I've got multiple exposures of the same scene, again, shot off of a tripod. I'll click Open and it pulls all of those raw files in. And I check the box, Attempt to automatically align source images. Now, if you do this, Photoshop is going to try its best to compensate for any subtle movement in the camera. If you're tweaking the exposure settings, it's possible that you might bump the camera slightly, and especially if you're shooting handheld, this will try to fix it. Again, I can't emphasize enough that a tripod goes a long way when shooting HDR. I'll click OK, and all of those images are opened up. Now, depending upon the resolution of the original files, this may take a while. In this case, I'm using raw files, which definitely adds to the processing time, but will give you superior results. The images are aligned, and a new dialog opens. Now, down below here, you can see the different exposures. We shot the scene with +3 all the way down to -1.6, and that has given us a wide range to work with. However, up top here, we're seeing a lot of noise, and that's actually caused by the clouds floating over time. So with the different exposures, it was a semi-windy day, we're going to get some ghosting. But fortunately, Photoshop offers this Remove Ghosts option, which goes through and cleans up that noise caused by movement. And you see it's gone. Now, there are several different modes to work with. You have the ability to do simple highlight compression, exposure and gamma adjustments, which allow you to set the exposure for the image and adjust the gamma to try to get the right balance between, and these are very simplistic. Equalize, but the most useful one is the local adaption. Now, this gives you all sorts of things to work with, including the ability to set the gamma as you see fit and exposure. But before you delve into all these sliders, I recommend starting with some of the useful presets. So up here, we have options. So for example, a straight flat conversion is going to combine the exposures together, pretty straightforward, and then again, click Remove Ghost, and you have a broader exposure. Now this is flat, and you can further refine it with your own color correction, a vibrance adjustment, or things like that once you create the merge document. However, if you want a more popish look, you'll find some of those. We've got some monochromatic with high contrast to give you sort of a washed out color with a grainy look. Here it is, the artistic monochromatic, a little bit stylized. Again, click Remove Ghosts to get rid of those. And I do like some of these photorealistic ones here, or more saturated, which will give you nice colors, and it pulls through and combines the exposures. Now, remember, whenever you pick a preset, you pretty much always have to go in and remove the ghost to clean that up. But that's given us a very nice look, and you can always back this off a bit as you see fit, and it will update. So that's looking nice. I'll go ahead and pull the exposure up just a tad. I like that. And when satisfied, I could click OK. Photoshop goes through, combines all of those 5 images together into a new image, which opens up into Photoshop, and you could process it as you see fit. Now again, if you're working with high resolution photos, this process could take a little bit, but the extra resolution is really worth it. Now let's compare that to the original picture. Here's what the camera could capture on its own with a single exposure. Here's what merging 5 exposures together was able to do. So obviously much more information. Now the cropping is caused there because I didn't have the camera perfectly locked down. So as it shifted to align those images, it had to crop the photo slightly. You can work around that by making sure that your camera is tightly locked down when shooting HDR. Because this is a file, you could do all sorts of things to it afterwards with adjustment layers. So I'll just say select color range, and I'm going to select this little yellowish area down here. Pull that in. Let's tighten up the localized color there. Narrow range. There we go. Get that a bit. Looks pretty good. Fuzz that out. Click OK. And I'm going to just change the color with a hue saturation. Pushing that to a red or a little bit bluer. There we go. Blue. Less saturated. And look, it's not as distracting anymore. Darken it down a bit. See? All sorts of controls as you see fit. And because that's an adjustment layer, you can just paint on it as you need to. Let's paint with white here, just to fill that little bit in. There we go. And that looks good. Nice soft brush will make that a gentle transition. Total control as you need it. Now, this high dynamic range command is very useful when you shoot an actual HDR image. But the Photoshop team was pretty cool and opened it up to work with normal images. Now, the HDR look has been made very popular by certain movie posters, and if you want, you could apply it to a normal picture. If at all possible, try to work with a 16-bit image, but you could still do it to a single image as well. Let's just open up a picture here, and I'm going to choose Image, Adjustments, Hdr Toning. And it's going to analyze this image here and give us a similar dialog box, and we have the ability to adjust things. We could tweak the gamma down, work with exposure, and see how the colors are starting to pop. You also have those exact same presets up here, so you can go with that more saturated look or with a photorealistic look. That looks great. I'm going to go ahead for a more saturated and just back that back a bit, pull the saturation down. I like that, and click OK. And you see we've got a nice look to the image there. If you have any problem areas, just take advantage of the history brush. If you call up the history panel, you could set this right next to the open state, grab your history brush, and simply paint back detail. So let's go in here, and I'm just going to paint back a little bit of detail on this, and it restores. There we go. And we can do the same over here on this wire. And notice we're just painting backwards in time as we need to. So great flexibility if you want to apply that look, but then back it off a little bit with the history brush. So there you have it, HDR in action, the ability to do it the right way with multiple exposures, or just get that HDR look with a normal image. For Understanding Adobe Photoshop, my name's Rich Harrington.